Okay, so I slowed down a little, but in my defense, I read two books physically this month and one audio reread. But in fairness, the two physical reads were pretty long and dense. So this video is allegedly a wrap up, but more accurately, it's just a review for The Darkness That Comes Before, because I'm going to spend about 45 seconds talking about the other two books. So on audio, I reread Project Hail Mary, because people being Kyle, kept telling me that the audio for Project Hail Mary was amazing. The audio for Project Hail Mary was amazing. So, yeah, I kind of stand by what I thought before about Project Hail Mary. I think it's amazingly plotted, amazingly paced, incredibly creative, with fantastic problem solving. That has some characters on the flashback stuff that are not maybe the most brilliant ever, but it's an awesome standalone book, and it's one of the most easily recommendable books. Anyway, I also read Perhaps the Stars, and I finished Terra Ignota. Now, I'm not going to talk about this that much because it's book 4 in a series, and I released my Terra Ignota review, but this book is incredible. It doesn't look that long. If you didn't watch the review, this book is actually, it's only 570 pages, but it's actually 330,000 words. It's just lies, and it just pretends to be short, when actually it's very long. So it took me a while to read, but this is some of the most incredible world building and storytelling and writing, and some of the just most creative storytelling. It's just genius. It's genius. Anyway, and then are The Darkness That Comes Before. So I'm now going to spend the next 10 minutes talking about this, and this video is just basically a review for this. Whatever. So this is by Scott Bakker, and is book 1 in a trilogy, and then I think it follows with a quartet after that, and I think there might be more in the future. It is known for being the darkest of the grimdark fantasy, where, all of the bad things happen and everything is terrible. And yeah, it's pretty dark. It's also known for being very dense and philosophical and all that jazz. And I was pretty worried. I had no idea how much I would like it. And one of my concerns is that free will is a big topic in here. And R. Scott Bakker, from what I've seen, is very much believes in determinism. And he also is very nihilistic, seemingly as a result of that determinism, meaning that he thinks free will isn't a thing, that everyone's actions are predictable. Not necessarily that you can't choose to do things, but you were always going to choose the thing that you chose. And if someone knew you perfectly, they could predict that you would make all the choices that they'd make in your life. And if we reran those decisions with all the exact same inputs, you would make all the same decisions again, and so would everyone else who's ever lived. And I'm cool with that. That's my random. This is the day to learn that for those of you watching, I'm pretty okay with the whole determinism thing. But I just don't think it matters that much in terms of anything else. And I think Bakker is pretty fundamentally nihilistic about it. And I kind of worried that would bleed through enough, and I would just kind of be is it though? Do we have to think that? Because free will probably isn't a thing, if it isn't a thing. But that didn't. It just ended up being a really good book. He also has I have seen some weird things. Dude, it's definitely R. Scott Bakker could be an interesting person to be in the head of. So yeah, this ended up being just really good. I was extremely impressed with the character work. I've heard a lot about his writing and about how he has some of the best line-by-line prose of anyone. And maybe, his prose is very good. As I was reading it, I was this is very, very well written. I would say that aspect isn't what blew me away. I thought the character work and the world building were the two things that most impressed me. Very unique psychologies from the characters. The main ones being Kellis, who you meet in the prologue, who's incredibly interesting. I forget their names. Guys, the main guy starts Archimedean. I suck at names. Then there's the step soldier dude. His introduction chapter was amazing. Esmonette was a pretty interesting character. One criticism I've seen of these books is a true criticism. Is that the women, the female characters, do not have much agency. Just because the world they're set up in is so brutal to them, and there's just a lot of violence against women. If Like, if that being in a book is going to turn you off it, like, hey, Bookborn, if you're watching this, don't read this book. Like, you'll just hate it. And I've seen what Bakker said about why he did that. And I think his line, I will try and paraphrase him here, but I will try and paraphrase him accurately and not misrepresent his position, is that he thinks it's disingenuous to write like the women characters like bootstrapping themselves, that if they're in a setting that has the deck so stacked against them, that acting like they can, that writing them overcoming this misrepresents reality, and that we should focus on setting up the world so it doesn't stack the deck against people, not try and motivate people to overcome the deck being stacked against them. Because I think his position is basically, if the deck is stacked against you, you're just not going to succeed. Like, it's just not going to happen. Which is a position you can have. And, I mean, you can write a setting where the deck is just less stacked against women. But he didn't do that, and didn't want to do that because I think he wanted, to do certain things. And that's fine. Do I think I would probably have enjoyed this book more if the women were less consistently victimized? Yes. Was it still extremely compelling just because Bakker is a very good writer? Also, yes. And yeah, so he's got that set up for some Holy War stuff. Some really, really interesting characters. World building feels just very alive. Like, it's one of the most vibrant settings that I've read. It has been quite dark. And yeah, it definitely can be a bit much at times. The scores I gave for these books, I think I have Project Hail Mary 9.3 on reread. Perhaps the Stars gets a 9.5. I really like The Darkness That Comes Before. Perhaps the Stars is easily my book of the month. The race for book of the year is pretty tough right now. I also have read the first 333 pages of Wind and Truth, because if you go on NetGalley, there is an arc for the excerpt, which it's just everything we're going to get like in the pre-release chapters, but you can read it now, which might have been a bad idea, because now I want to continue, and I can't, which is deeply unfortunate. But that's going to be in the Book of the Year race for sure, and it might just win the Book of the Year race easily. It's the one that has that chance. And then I gave The Darkness That Comes Before an 8.4. I do think the way it set things up was pretty interesting. It was split into 6 parts, and like the first part was focused on like really letting you get to know this character's situation. And it wasn't all that, like, it POV hopped, so it wasn't all that character's POV, but all the POVs were pushing forward this person's story, and then it switched to another character, and then it switched to another character, and then it kind of brought them together. So it was to some degree a setup book, but it was a very compelling setup book, so that ended up being okay. I actually ended up comparing in my head a lot to Will to Battle, the previous book in Terra Ignota, because they have pretty similar strengths. I like Will to Battle more because I think I like Ada Palmer more, but I've only read one R. Scott Bakker book, so he could turn that around. But it's going to be tough because Ada Palmer is a genius, so that's a high bar. So that's it. I read those 3 books. One of them was really long, and I mean, Darkness That Comes Before is reasonably long. It's not short, but I mean it's not super long. Anyway, we're going to read more in September. So, have a good day, everyone. But let me know what you read in August 2024. And if you have read these 3 books, what you thought of them.